Welcome to Wednesday Wisdom. Today's episode is about how organizations decide to use their power, platforms, and resources over time, and whether they're building something that lasts beyond their own moment of visibility. At Words Beats in Life, our vision for 2040 is grounded in what we call the four-generation framework. It is a long view approach to cultural work that asks a simple, demanding question. Are we only producing programs, or are we building conditions for work, knowledge, and leadership to survive across generations? After more than 2 decades working locally, nationally, and internationally, I want to talk about how we intentionally use our resources not just to grow our organization, but to elevate the work of others in our field, preserve collective memory, and pass on strategies that can be replicated long after we're gone. Welcome to episode 14 of Wednesday Wisdom. I'm your host, Mazi, Mutafa, Executive Director and co-founder of Words Beats in Life. Let's begin by talking about the four-generation framework. It is what I could describe as a new idea for us, thinking about telling our story and the impact we have across multiple generations. The four-generation framework is not about age, it's about continuity. It asks how work moves from founders to successors, from elders to emerging leaders, from current practitioners to future stewards. It shifts organizations from short-term impact to long-term responsibility. It reframes success away from scale alone and towards durability. Are you building something that will last, or at the very least, whose impact will last? Here's something for you to think about. If your work cannot be carried forward by people who are not yet in the room, it's not truly sustainable. This is especially important as you think about how to build something that has an impact and some longevity. Especially in moments like this, but not just like moments like this. Centering marginalized voices must be a structural choice. Centering marginalized voices is not simply symbolic. It's operational. It shows up in who is paid, who is published, who is programmed, and who is archived. It requires intentional allocations of resources, not leftover opportunities. It challenges dominant narratives about whose work is worthy of preservation and replication. I've had my fair share of opportunities to sit on grant review panels where we would talk about diverse audiences and bringing in new folks to see the same old things, and how many institutions see that as centering marginalized voices, just having you in the room. That is not how we define centering marginalized voices. For example, it's critical that you understand you have a responsibility to use your stages, your publications, your festivals, and platforms to feature peers, not just promote internal programs and priorities. That you are a steward of resources, ideally an ambassador within a community, and a person that's able to open up platforms and opportunities for others. Something to think about could be who you choose to center today determines whose work survives tomorrow. Let's talk about elevating the work in your field and community and other ways that you can make an impact. Organizations often confuse growth with visibility. That the idea that you're growing your budget or growing your audience doesn't necessarily mean that people see what it is you do and the impact that it is that you're making. The Vision for 2040, which was a document we created in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic to vision what the world could be like 20 years from that point, prioritizes an ecosystem, and an ecosystem that's healthy over individual dominance. It elevates the means for creating shared platforms, shared credit, shared infrastructure. This applies locally, regionally, and nationally. Is what you're building shining light only on what you do, or the people that you're able to engage in your local community, region, country, or the world? If you're just starting out, that might sound really daunting, but we'll talk a little bit later about how it's not quite as difficult as it might seem. One of the ways elevation can show up is in co-curation, the co-curation of events, of festivals, of programs, of broadcasts, of podcasts. The idea that you're working with people to create the things that you're producing for the world, as opposed to just doing them on your own. Shared publications and archives. When you create publications, whether that is a video on your favorite social media platform or archiving the work on that same social media platform, are you making an intentional effort to bring in the work of other people, not just your own work? Commissioning peers and collaborators to be able to showcase the things that they're doing, educating your community about the ecosystem that you're a part of, redirecting attention and resources outward, not just inward. One of the things that I continue to be amazed by is whenever we use our social media platforms to amplify the work of others, that often gets the greatest response and reaction. There's value in being able to tell the stories or show the stories or promote the stories of others. Everyone isn't necessarily going to care about the things that you're doing all the time, but the opportunity to be able to showcase people who are your peers, your co-opetition, the things that you're a fan of, is a great way to be able to add value to communities and people's experiences. Something to think about could be strong institutions or even emerging ones do not compete for attention. They expand the field of possibilities for the ecosystem. The telling the story of the people that do work like yours also gives people context to understand, why are you doing this work? You might be surprised how often I, in the 24 years I've been doing this work, meet people who think that we're the only group in the world that does the kind of work we do. That made it our responsibility to say, no, we collaborate with such and such in this country or in this city or in this state, lifting up the work of others. You actually benefit by having people know that there are other people doing the kinds of things you do, because it helps them situate you in that ecosystem. Have you thought about the responsibility there is in preserving and archiving collective work? If you're at the beginning stages, you might be like, no, Mazi, I haven't thought about my responsibility in preserving and archiving the work of my community. But I want to tell you early on, one of the things that's really important is to have a sense of what differentiates you from your peers, where there are opportunities for collaboration, and how it is that telling and presenting and sharing the stories of those doing similar or dissimilar work actually adds value. For the last 3 years, Words Beats and Life has had a fellowship. I spent a great deal of time last week promoting somebody else's fellowship, because just because it's not an opportunity at Words Beats and Life doesn't mean it's not valuable. Not valuable to our ecosystem, not valuable to our community. It means that actually is part of the reason why it is valuable, because there's more than one set of resources that people should be aware of and being able to take advantage of and being encouraged to take advantage of. Culture work is fragile when it is undocumented. Archiving is a defense against erasure. It's not a luxury. Preservation includes journals, recordings, photos, curricula, oral histories. Shout out to Martha Diaz and the Hip Hop Education Center and the work that they've been doing for decades around documenting, archiving, and presenting the stories of hip hop through what was originally the H2O, the Hip Hop Odyssey Film Festival, to their hip hop guidebook, to today teaching people how to build archives of their local hip hop communities all over the world. We're really excited to be working with them on building our own archive, an official archive accessible to the public in 2026, 2027. So shout out to Martha Diaz for the important work that she's been doing, and folks like our friends like the hip hop archivist in Uganda, documenting the work of his community through photography, through podcasting, and publishing. Archives should reflect collective contributions, not just institutional branding, meaning that the things that are happening in the community around you are just as important as the work that you're doing, or should be, to the institution that you're building. How can you, brand new organizational leader or longtime vet or individual who doesn't necessarily run an organization, think about helping build an archive? Well, you can publish your peer voices. Publishing can take the form of a magazine or an academic article or a book, but it can also take the form of literally turning your phone and interviewing somebody and being able to publish that. It could be documenting collective projects or collaborative projects. So how did you do it? What was the process of being able to bring all these folks together? Shout out to Clyde Valentine and the folks at The Way You Move. Wow, The Way You Move. I'm very bad with names today. Shout out to Clyde Valentine and the folks over at Arts for Everybody and the work that they did not only to do multiple culture and health and wellness activations throughout the United States, but then spent, I feel like, close to a year documenting the impact of that work so that people in the future and in the present could look to see what is it they learned, what objectives they had, how they accomplished them, what they measured, et cetera, being able to not only document what it is that happened, but how it happened and the impact that it made. So treating archives as public resources. Is your Instagram feed an archive of what's happening in your community, what the kind of work that you're doing and that your peers are doing? Is your YouTube page dedicated to lifting up content created by peers and neighbors and people you aspire to be like? How are you using the spaces that you have access to be able to give people access to more resources, more information, more opportunity? This is a question that every leader should ask, not just how will I create things that show that I, through the work that I am doing, adds value, but that literally our ability to know what other people are doing and to elevate that so that people in our circle are aware of it is part of that responsibility. Something to think about would be, if it's not documented, it can be rewritten or erased. That there is a real value to documenting what it is that's happening all around you so that future generations or even current generations that just aren't tapped in at the moment that you're tapped in get access to the information and inspiration that either you're producing or you are witnessing. A question for you to contemplate is, who taught you what you're already doing? Did someone pass on strategies that worked? Did you witness the work of others and say, you know what, I really like what they're doing and I want to kind of pattern my work after that? Well, hoarding knowledge weakens movements and communities. So as you learn and you grow, sharing what it is you're learning that's making it possible for you to grow is critically important to be shared. It's valuable to be able to tell your story, not just for the purpose of aggrandizing your own achievements, but for helping other people who might be inspired by the work that you're doing to be not just inspired, but motivated to do some of the things you're doing. One of the greatest compliments I've ever been paid is meeting people from other countries who've been following our work, who decided to do their own versions of some of the things that we've done or included our work in dissertations or in books so that other people could read and learn about them. It's critical that you not hoard knowledge, that you be invested in a strong ecosystem that learns from what you've done well and where you have failed. The 4-generation framework that we're talking about requires sharing tools, systems, and lessons learned. Replication is not a loss of control. It is evidence of your impact. When people see what you're doing and decide that they want to attempt to replicate it, whether in collaboration with you or just as their own independent entity that's just paying attention and knows that the things that you're doing are not trademarked or patented or protected in ways that they can't take inspiration for how to remix them. When I started Words, Beats, and Life, myself and the other 3 co-founders, Shatisha, Steve, and Kaniqua, the first thing we did was look at what other people were doing and decided what we liked about what they were doing without ever interviewing them, just looking at what the stories they were telling and the ways they were approaching curricula development and deciding what we liked about that and what we didn't. One of the I think smartest, but maybe toughest decisions we made early on was to not do what most other hip hop organizations were doing, which was to focus on rap music. We decided to focus on the other elements of hip hop because we felt like there were more career opportunities for young people and adults straight out of classes to be able to go out in the world and work versus the dearth or the great number of MCs who were always looking for work. We knew lots of muralists who were working. We knew lots of DJs and producers that were working. work. We knew lots of dancers who were competing. So we focused on those elements. And we did that because we looked at what other people in similar situations around the country were doing in terms of the kinds of groups that they would create. So replicating is not a loss of control. It is evidence of impact, and deciding to deviate from someone else's structure is not a diss to them. It is deciding to, as a local artist says often, he was putting some paint where it ain't. It's the idea of saying, well, we're going to find our own niche and how it is we contribute to this larger ecosystem. An ecosystem is only healthy if it has diversity in it. If there's a whole bunch of the same species, I don't know what that's called, but it's not an ecosystem. unless that species is a bunch of cannibals that only seek to destroy each other. But if you got butterflies and moths and grasshoppers and crickets and lizards and snakes and all these are the things that make for a healthy ecosystem. Diversity of life, diversity of business, diversity of efforts. This includes part of the responsibility in being able to pass on strategies includes the naming of mistakes as clearly as we do our successes. I feel like I talk a little bit about mistakes in previous episodes, but it's important for you not necessarily to go around broadcasting, hey, everybody, I made a mistake, but to be able to be honest with yourself when you fall short of goals that you've established, with yourself, with your board of directors, with your community. One of the things I have loved the most in recent weeks is bringing on someone who used to be a student in our after-school program as a teacher, and her being introduced to the why of what we do, the kind of guts of the organization, and her saying that all the things that we said we were trying to do, she actually experienced without ever knowing that those were the things we were trying to do, as in terms of having them named to her as a student. If she had gone through that same kind of onboarding process and be like, wow, this is all brand new. I can't believe this is what you all are doing now. It would have been really disheartening, but it also would have been important for us to recognize that we've fallen short of some of our efforts. Out of curiosity, have you made any investments in toolkits to be able to pass on to others, framework documents, training modules, open conversations about failure and adaptation? Each of these things is really valuable if your goal is to pass on strategies that work. Part of knowing what works is also knowing why things failed, at least as you understand them. Having training modules is a great way to make sure that people are all on the same page because they're getting the same information. Framework documents help people to understand the why, the what, the how, and how it's related to them. Toolkits, step-by-step process for you to get your game on track. Sorry, that was a little biggie first. Sometimes it's important for you to think about the fact that movements grow stronger when strategies travel freely. One of my best friends in this space is a brother by the name of Babaluku, and he is based in Uganda. One of the things he does often is build tools for particularly young African leaders to learn from what he's doing, from the successes and the mistakes, and encouraging them to build their own things, to be an impact in their own community. Not to come and join him and to be a part of what he's building, but to join him at a table as a peer, as a brother or a sister, to be able to talk about what each of them is doing in their own community to make a difference. I've loved to see the young leaders that he's worked with go on to create their own things, impacting their own communities in ways that maybe he never imagined. I bet some of you are wondering, how do we elevate others without losing our own visibility? Well, I think that part of that answer has to be that the people that you're elevating understand why you're elevating them. It's not just to benefit them, it's to benefit the larger field. And so when opportunities present themselves for them to elevate the work that you're doing, they take advantage of that. One of the best examples, I have a good friend, and I won't name them on this live because it might be there might be some sort of a conflict of interest, but they talked to me about how they were sitting amongst a set of people and were bigging us up because they were like, we were one of the few groups that did X, Y, and Z. And they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to talk about the difference that they see us trying to make in the world. But because the relationship we've had with them has been one of trying to elevate the work that they're doing because it's so impactful and so beautiful and so inspiring and so necessary in the kind of creative ecosystem that each of us are a part of. There's no downside to them lifting us up when they have an opportunity to shine, just like there's no downside to you lifting up other people at moments of your own visibility. You might also be wondering, what if our funders only want to see our organization centered? Well, I think then it's important for you to talk to your funders. Talk to them about why it's important for you and the work that you're doing to elevate an ecosystem. I've honestly never heard a funder say that they only wanted to see one organization centered, especially if the work that that organization is doing is kind of as a convener or as an organizer within a larger ecosystem or community. That being able to say that, hey, we support X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z supports us is part of really building a healthy community, this kind of intergenerational, non-gatekeeping, non-resource hoarding community that most of us say that we want to be a part of and that we want to help promote. I bet you're wondering, what is the difference between replication and dilution? What is the difference between replication and dilution? Well, I mean, I think that the short answer to that question is, why are you replicating it? Is someone replicating what you're doing because they see value in it, or because they see a payday in it? If someone is only doing what you're doing because they believe that's going to get them access to resources, not necessarily because they believe in the impacts you're working to have. I mean, one of the surest ways to make sure that people don't dilute what it is you're doing is to really make it transparent what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, the impacts you're hoping to have, so that when someone doesn't just see the end product, but gets to see the when, the where, the what, the how, and the why of it, then they can make an informed decision about how much of your why is in alignment with their why, and where you part, how they plan to remix it. I would really say that anything that someone does that's inspired by what someone else does is just a remix. I would never even call something a dilution. I would just call it a remix. Another question you might have is, how do small organizations think in 4-generation terms? Well, the truth is, depending on the kind of organization you operate, you likely are already thinking in at least a 3-generation framework. Why do I say 3 generations? Well, because if you're a nonprofit that has a staff where the volunteer paid, and then you have a set of clients, whether those are families or children or adults, and you have a board of directors. Oftentimes, board of directors are made up of kind of mid-level professionals or even more seasoned professionals, people who are 30 to 50 years old. And then nonprofit staffs, especially ones that get founded by people fresh out of college, are usually run by people in their 20s, maybe early 30s. And then the client base that you're serving, if it's a family, could be an older family, but usually is a younger family who maybe has children. So if the things you're doing for that family include impacting those children are 1 generation. Their parents might be the same age as the staff, and then the board is a set of elders, oftentimes from the communities. Those are 3 generations that are all working to make the same impact. What are you learning from that elder generation that's at a board level? What kind of guidance are they giving? What kind of collaborations and partnerships are they helping to develop because of their own years of working in the kind of work that you're doing? So that, I would say that that's at least 3 generations. We talk about a 4-generation framework because we've gone from being a program that was started to serve high school students to being an organization that serves high school, middle school, and elementary school students, so children to youth, and then on the weekends does adult programming, and then through our festivals and other opportunities work with elders. So that's where our 4 generations of impact come in, that we're literally deliberately working with from the very young to the seasoned in our communities, and recognizing that the idea of just youth development is something that is very popular in the NGO community. Um, I think for a whole range of reasons, some of which are more diabolical than altruistic. Uh, but I think it's important, if you're going to be a leader in your community, to not just be focused on children as the future, but to be focused on the kinds of work that you can do with young adults or adults and elders, because they're all in that same community. Yes, they have different needs, they have different expectations, they have different lives that they've lived, but they each bring value to the communities that you're working in. And so thinking about either how you develop programming that reaches each of those communities, or how you collaborate with organizations that maybe serve just one of those groups, and you create a kind of continuum of care, support, investment, engagement, I think it's critical. That if you work with young people have parents, parents often still have parents. So thinking about how it is that you can be a resource to each of those groups. When we design a festival, we literally say we want to bring we want to bring artists who can perform in such a way that a grandmother could be there, that a parent could be there, that a child could be there, and all of them be actively engaged, not just witnessing other people be engaged. And that's really critical to us in terms of thinking about the communities that we impact. All right, so I got some homework for you around the 4-generation readiness exercise. I want you to identify who came before you in the field of work that you do. Who are the organizations, whether in your own city, town, or country, that were doing the work that you're doing? Name who you are actively elevating right now. What are the voices that you're centering, the experiences that you're centering? Who are the voices that you are elevating, whether that's on your social media, in your publications, at your events? Who are you elevating? Third question, identify what work you are preserving. What work are you preserving, whether that is, again, through social media, through publications, through the development of archives? What work are you preserving? Toolkits, modules, etc., including their names in your trainings, elevating their work in your governing documents. When we wrote our first business plan, we had to look at the things that already existed in our field and to talk about what they do, and then describe what we thought our competitive advantage might be, but also what were the opportunities for alignment and cooperation. I want you to list one strategy you could share publicly. I'm doing that right now, talking about our 4-generation framework and the vision for 2040. The vision for 2040 is on our website. We see ourselves as a convener that got a bunch of people to contribute to that vision, so it is not ours. It's just housed on our website, and it is impacting the work that we do, and how it is that we approach whose voices we're centering, elevating, and promoting and archiving. Ask who will inherit your work if you leave tomorrow. And I don't mean a succession plan for you as an executive. I mean, if your doors close tomorrow, who will inherit the work that you are doing? Who will continue it on? Is that employees? Is that volunteers? Is that members of your board? Is that people who've just been paying attention to the content you've been creating on social media? Who will inherit the work if you left it tomorrow? Draft one action that supports someone else's longevity, not your own. What is one thing that you could do this week to support someone else in your ecosystem's longevity, not your own? All right? I do want you to take some time to think about the following questions. Where are you benefiting from the work of others without naming it? Meaning, one of the things I try to do often is, as I'm talking about things, I try to point to the person, or people, or organization that either I witnessed or taught me or inspired me, so that they're getting their just due. So where are you benefiting from the work of others but not naming it? And I'm asking you that because I want to encourage you to start naming the people that inspire, motivate, challenge you. I just got done listening to Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, a collection of writings by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And one of the things I was most struck by was that he really earned that doctor and that Dr. Martin Luther King, because his references, his knowledge, his understanding, the philosophies and experiences and writings he was pulling from, he named them. And he would tell you, like, such and such said, da da da, and here's what I agreed with them from them, and here's what I didn't. But he had to know what they said in order to be able to agree or disagree. So are you being a student of this field, of this work that you're a part of? Another question for you to answer. What knowledge are you holding that could help someone else move faster? What knowledge are you holding, whether you're at the beginning of this journey, in the middle of this journey, or towards the end of this journey? What knowledge are you holding that you could share that could help someone else move faster? All right? Last question. If your organization closed, if it closed, I know I'm talking to you all mostly about starting an organization, but thinking about the end and the beginning is never a bad idea. If your organization closed, what would still remain in the field after you were gone? The 4-generation framework reminds us that institutions are temporary, but culture is not. The vision for 2040 is not about legacy as ego, it's about stewardship. It's about using the resources we have today to strengthen the work that will outlive us, whether or not our names are attached to it. If today's episode leaves you with one takeaway, let it be this. Success is not measured by how much attention you receive, but how much capacity you leave behind. Thank you for tuning into Wednesday Wisdom with yours truly, Mazi Mutafa. If this episode served you, share it with someone thinking beyond the next grant cycle. And join us next week as we continue building institutions that can carry culture forward across generations. Thanks so much, y'all. Peace.